Yes, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mayor, we have executive session minutes for June 19, 2018 for sessions 1 and 2. I need a motion, please.
Move it.
Second.
Commissioner Rogers?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucci?
Aye.
Commissioner Evans?
Aye.
Mayor Scarpelli?
Aye. Communications.
Yes, we have the VFW Post 493 has submitted a letter requesting permission to hold a daily instant raffle, including all Sundays from July 20th, 2018 to July 12th, 2019. I need a motion, please.
Move it.
Second.
Commissioner Rogers?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucci?
Aye.
Commissioner Evans?
Aye.
Mayor Scarpelli?
Aye. We're
And
going to move from the regular agenda. We have Prism with us tonight that's going to do a presentation. Mr. Inglesino, you want to give a little introduction?
Should have snacks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. John Inglesino, I'm the special redevelopment attorney for the township of Nutley. Even though I'm here at this microphone, I represent the township of Nutley. And just to provide a little bit of context for the presentation we're about to see. Very briefly,
as I think you know, the former Roche site was declared in need of redevelopment back in 2015. Prism, who is here tonight to do the presentation, subsequently purchased the entire site. You're familiar with the medical school that was developed on a portion of the site, and now the question is what happens with the rest of the site. Tonight you're going to hear a presentation with regard to a redevelopment plan only for the reoccupancy of the existing buildings that remain on the site, with a few improvements that are proposed with respect to Building 102 regarding some additional parking. The balance of the site will be considered at a later date. This redevelopment plan that is being considered for introduction tonight, which we're referring to Phase 2A, again, only deals with the reoccupancy of the existing buildings that are currently on the site. And so with that preamble, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you, I'll turn the floor over to Prism for their presentation.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Diaz.
These are exciting times, and I think you've gotten to know us a little bit over the last 2 years, my partner and I, to know that we are naturally exuberant people. So I will try and contain my enthusiasm for the purposes of making this presentation. But let it be known that we are now at the first stepping stone, we think, of the radical transformation of the former Roche campus into a new economic engine for the township of Nutley, neighboring Clifton, and the region itself. So many great things have been happening. There are so many great things in the work. To wit, the group here, and I acknowledge the commissioners' time and effort that I know you have been spending in a very compressed period of time, and I'll explain to the public why some time periods have been a little compressed, to look at a redevelopment plan that will be applicable to the former Building 1, now known as 100 Metro Drive, the white building, 7 stories, the 15-story tower formerly known as Building 76, now known as 200 Metro, and of course the research and development building on the eastern side, southeastern portion of the campus, now known as 111 Ideation Way. Monday, I believe, subject to finish up a couple of things and getting our TCO for the medical school, 500 students intend to be showing up onto the On3 campus. I think to complement the already plus or minus 100 people now at Modern Meadow, that our wonderful biofabrication company, which, I think it's important to note. I was in the building the other day, and we were practicing safety, and we had a fire alarm. And when Modern Meadow moved in, I think they had about 35 people. I watched over 100 people marshal out of the building. So you talk about jobs and vitality in an industry. It's worth noting that Modern Meadow recently was one of 61 global firms that was awarded by the World Economic Forum as a technology pioneer. These are the kind of companies and the kind of jobs that my partner and I endeavored and promised to help bring back to Nutley in this region. So we're very excited about their growth in the campus, and we're more excited about other growth that's happening. One of those growths that's happening is we will officially announce tonight that, yes, indeed, Ralph Lauren Corporation has executed a lease to occupy the entirety of what we now call 100 Metro Boulevard, and subject to our ability to deliver some of the items that we are going to present to you tonight, intends to occupy that building in and around the fourth quarter of 19. They have signed a lease that will last more than a decade and a half. Ralph Lauren is one of the most venerable fashion brands and icons in the fashion industry today, with a market cap in excess of $10 billion and a credit rating from Standard & Poor's and Moody's of AA2. So we are talking about, in the fashion industry, a rock-solid company. Somebody said to me the other day, I think it was at the medical school opening, I heard one of the politicians say, well, we want a STEM campus and technology and the like, and I don't know what fashion is doing here. Well, think for a minute. Modern Meadow makes leather in a laboratory. Ralph Lauren is a fashion house. I mean, there is technology in fashion, there is technology in everything that we're doing today. So we think incorporating this kind of brand and a company that's been committed to New Jersey is one of the great things that we've been striving to achieve at the campus. So a couple of things that have to happen in order for Ralph Lauren to continue on its commitment in its lease and occupy its space is things that PRISM has to do and requires action by the township, the council here, is we need to be able to park the building for them, which is about 1,000 employees, and we also need to be able to park ultimately the future occupant of 200 Metro Boulevard, the tower. Now let me tell you now, advance notice, that PRISM has been having very fruitful and active discussions with two potential tenants, each of which would propose to occupy the entirety of that building. They are, again, like Ralph Lauren, they are a leading brand in its particular business industry. It is not a fashion industry. Both of them are multi-billion-dollar enterprises, and both would consider relocating somewhere between 1,100 and 1,500 employees to this campus and making this building, again, their USA headquarters. So the activity and a lot of the plans that we are going to unveil tonight that we're asking you to consider both reflect what Ralph Lauren's expectations are in terms of delivering for them, their employees, their ability to live and utilize this space and the campus, but also because of the discussions that we have ongoing now with prospective tenants of the campus. And some of these comments and some of these designs and some of these elements are being reflected in those ongoing discussions. So it is quite fluid. So the second component, in addition to a garage, structured parking to provide the parking necessary for the two buildings, the second component that has to happen is, again, we said a year and a half ago, I think, when we made a presentation to the governing body, that our first element and desire was to stabilize the campus, reoccupy the existing buildings, stabilize the rateable base, bring back the jobs, provide that activity and vitality of the campus to show that it is a viable workplace and an energetic workplace, that we wanted to get these buildings back off the radar screen. They were off quite for some time, as a single tenant occupancy campus. So if you've had the occasion, I know some of you had to be on the campus now, because for 87 years you really didn't get much of an opportunity with Roche to do that. You've seen that many of these buildings don't really have their own independent front doors or identifications or entrances. The way Roche approached the campus was, we're Roche, we're paying you your salary, we give you great benefits, we're a wonderful company, park where you can park, walk wherever building you're going to, and that's the way the world will work for you inside our gates. Well, the world doesn't work that way for multi-tenanted campuses and for the corporations today, who are not willing to tell their employees, park all the way over there on Route 3 and walk through this campus on this building. So having proximate parking that is appropriately sized and appropriately designed for these buildings is a critical component, but also creating the identity for these buildings. So Building 100 Metro, we're going to show you tonight, unveil, presentation of an approximate $7 million exterior renovation to the building, which is exterior and interior lobby renovation. That's going to radically change the look of the building at the base of the base level of the building to provide a distinctive, high-quality, first-class identity and entrance for this building and for Ralph Lauren. The next item that we will address, and I think it's implicit in our discussions, is we are creating several different lots via subdivision, which will occur. You might ask, and I'll answer now, anticipating your questions. We have spent enough time together. I know some of the questions that will be asked. But we are creating 3 lots right now where Building 100 and 200 and the garage are, where today there's but 1 lot. So each building needs to stand on its own independent lot for a variety of purposes, one of which, of course, is financing. Second one, which, of course, will be ultimately the redevelopment plan and any financial agreements negotiated or entered into with the township. But also the parking lot itself, we have been in discussions with the Essex County Improvement Authority, and we continue to hold discussions with them. The garage itself may be separately financed through bonds issued by pass-through Essex County bonds, in which case the garage itself would need to be on its own independent lot. So the reasoning for us to ultimately create 3 lots out of 1 today where Building 100 and 200 exists is primarily to facilitate the complex arrangements that are required in today's very complex financing world. Building 111 Ideation Way, right now with Modern Meadow Inn and Hackensack Meridian Health having signed for the top 2 floors, we have the last piece of space, to let you know, that has been committed to, and we anticipate on executing the lease in the next several weeks, subject to their board approval. But we're excited to tell you that NJI, a division of NJIT, actually their Innovation Institute, has signed on to occupy the remaining space in the building in the lower level, approximately 12,000 feet of space, and will develop, and I think this is very important to the biotechnology people who are interested in this, and the overall bioinfrastructure on the campus. They are going to develop a gene cell therapy laboratory. If you're asking yourself, well, what does that mean? Well, today's day and age for cancer, people being treated for cancer and oncology treatments, all the rage and the success that's happening now is called T cells. Right? This is about taking cells out of your own body, reprogramming them, re-engineering them to fight the infection itself, and putting it back in so it can do its job. There are very few laboratories in the United States, I think only 4 today, that actually do this. And NJIT has determined that putting this in this location will assist them and allow them with Big Pharma to help optimize that process and help us cure cancer in the future. So we're very excited about all these things that are going on. Let me tell you about the parking in the garage. We're going to present to you a garage tonight that is 7 stories in height, approximately 70 feet. I'll tell you today that that parking ratio in that garage for the 2 buildings ends up at about 4.6 spaces per 1,000 feet. It's the equivalent of about 2,590 parking spaces. We're presenting a 7-story garage, or hopefully then to bring the site plan for the planning board for approval. But there is the possibility, depending upon which tenant commits to the 200 Metro building, that the garage gets built at only 6 stories. But we already know today from our discussions with one of the tenants they intend to occupy with additional employees. They fit in the way they scale their seats and their desks. They fit more employees into the building than one of the others. And they've asked, can we accommodate an additional parking ratio? If that happens to be the tenant, and by the way, we would all love to have them, if that's the case, they would require the 7-story garage, and that is what we'll be presenting tonight and seeking approval. But I will tell you openly today, it is possible that actually only 6 gets built. Now, I can understand some trepidation, some ideas about massing. What does a 7-story garage look like? What does 70 feet look like on that site? We're going to show you some pictures, but before I do, I want to take a little walk down memory lane, because I think sometimes we forget about density and massing and the things that have previously existed on the campus. And I want you to be aware that where we are planning this garage, in between 100 and 200 Metro, slightly to the rear, closer to the train tracks, there once stood Roche's Building 86, a 7-story, 16-foot floor-to-floor, nearly 121 square foot laboratory building, occupied the same space where we're proposing to build a garage, which has less mass and less height. So I do want you to see this and understand that when you see the garage and you understand what we're trying to achieve by putting the garage in this location proximate to the buildings, that mass of that nature has existed here previously. And this building was demolished, begun demolition in 2005 and was finished in 2007. 100 Metro, old Building 1, was constructed in 1998 or 99. So the 3 buildings in that mass existed here for quite a few years in that configuration. I think that's important to note in terms of visibility of what you saw from Kingsland Street and what you saw from on the campus and the surrounding neighborhoods. So I'm not going to do all the talking tonight, thank goodness. We've got a number of experts that are here. I want to tell you a little bit about the garage and a little bit about the time frames and what's been condensed in the redevelopment plan. So designing this garage has been a struggle. One, trying to get and fit the right number of parking spaces here, trying to create a garage that is a smaller massing. What you're going to see on this garage is on the back side of the garage along the train track, we created a sawtooth design. We looked at different options. One was more of a straight along the line curve of the train tracks, and we determined that a sawtooth design de-emphasized its mass, made it look, quite frankly, a lot more like an office building. You're going to see a garage with precast spandrels that have an incredible architectural design and relief to them. Right? So my partner and I, Ed and I, spent a lot of time trying to figure out we don't want just blank panels. Right? So we spent a lot of time finding a form liner and negotiating with the precast companies to create an architectural facade on the garage that will be incredibly pleasing and sort of repetitive of what an office building itself might look like. We've had to deal with a lot of surface conditions. So the constraints in terms of how the garage is designed, how it's massed on site, reflects some of the issues that we have with the number of steam tunnels and utility tunnels and utilities that run throughout this campus that we have to work around when digging footings and foundations. So we spent a lot of time moving the garage, pushing it back, expanding it, pushing it out, to arrive at something that, A, got us the parking spaces that were needed for these buildings and created a design that we think works for the site, de-emphasizes its mass, and works for ingress and egress. We had to, in this garage for Ralph Lauren, also accommodate storage that is conditioned space. So there is almost slightly under 10,000 feet of storage that has been designed in the lower level of this garage as well. That is part of the, I believe, a conditional use proposal in the redevelopment plan. So that storage facility, Ralph Lauren, in their office space, they have lots of trade shows and things, and they store Ducati motorcycles and, other things and the like that they use at trade shows, an example, and references to their brand and identity. At this point, I think what you want to see is the photos, the pictures, understand the design and development. And I think, Merrill, you could come up and I suppose you could introduce probably Charles Logan from Aztec, who has been our architect on the garage design itself, unless, Commissioners, you have any questions for me.
Merrill Goncher, Sills, Cummis, and Gross. And I just wanted to discuss briefly I'm going to bring Charles up to start with give you the description and the visuals on the parking deck. The subdivision that Jean referenced, the 3 lots that we propose to create from existing lot 300 would be one lot which really is just the improvement of existing building 100, another lot which is existing building 200, and the third lot which would encompass both the parking deck and the open courtyard. And then the other subdivision, what we refer to as Building 102 or 111 Ideation Way, is Lot 1 in Block 201, and also a small, irregularly shaped Lot 20. That would also be subdivided into 2 lots. Only one lot, which has Building 102, would be included in the plan. And we have more information. Okay. Our first witness is one of our architects, Charles Logan from... Well, don't you want to know who he is? I'm not going to qualify him as a witness, but I'm going to tell you who's talking.
Okay, very good.
Sorry, it's a hard habit to break. So if we can just, Mr. Logan.
Yes,
and just describe what you gave them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What you have in your possession is actually reflected on the board, so that way you can follow along with us. And thank you this evening. Jean has done a very nice job of presenting the complex and the building. Thank you again. So this is an open parking garage. It's zoned as S2 with an accessory storage use of S1. I just want to give you some statistics, and then I'm going to talk about the building itself. As Jean's pointed out, it's a 7-tier building. It's really a 6-story building with 7 tiers. So the roof of the 6th story is actually the 7th tier, and so it's open parking. The building area per floor, thank you, Jean. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. As you can see on the second plan that you have, this is giving you an overview of the building. It's bounded by Road H.
Excuse me, just quick.
I'm sorry, sir.
As the commissioners, we have all this here on these in this booklet. What's up on your?
Yes, what's on the boards is what's in the books.
There's members of the public here. Would you mind just kind of flipping that so people can?
Be glad to. Would you like to do it before or after I describe it?
Well, maybe you can just come over here and do it because I can read along. You don't have to. I don't have to see you. I just
Okay.
There's people here that might benefit from that.
No problem. One second. Let me just logistically move this.
Yeah.
Stand over here. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Very comfortable. You can do that more towards the public if you can. We're good. Okay. Because I got it here. Right?
Okay. All right. Now I have to get my cheat sheets over here. Okay, so as I was pointing out, this is a 6-story building that has 7 tiers. If you'll see here, it starts at, and actually each floor goes 11.6 is the first floor, then it goes 10.8, 10.8, 10.8, 10.8, and we get up to the 7th floor. And the top is actually parking. The footprint of the building itself is bounded by Road H, is what Prism has named this road for right now. Road D, Prism Way. And as you can see, it's a triangulated space. We have 200 Metro here and 100 Metro, which is already pointed out by Jean, was formerly Building 1 and Building 76. There is 4 points of access from the two buildings. One comes into this lobby on the part of the building, and the other one comes into this lobby as part of the building. And then there's 2 other pedestrian areas close to the point of access where the vehicular access is. There is access for cars on Road D and access for cars on Road H. Both of them will have a gate where you actually key into it. The people who will park here are only those employees in Building 100 and 200. This is not open to the public. The interesting part of this design was that the owners could have very easily put a straight wall across here, and it was discussed it was going to be very monstrous, it would be uncomfortable, people wouldn't like it, and it just was overpowering. So it was decided to actually, as Gene pointed out, to create a sawtooth, which was more interesting. So what happens is the sun moves across the building, it creates this light and dark, so you get shadows, so it creates a little bit of a piece of moving art, but it's stationary because of the way the sun moves across the building itself. The parking itself has ramps that will go up. It's 2 direction, and there's parking along the way on those ramps. What I'm going to show you now is the ground floor. As you can see here, that we have the area on the floor itself. It is open parking is 118,970 square feet. The accessory storage, as was pointed out, is right here, is actually 8,230 square feet. And the total floor footprint is 127,200. On this particular floor, there's 308 parking spaces, of which we have 6 ADA van parking, which is required on this floor. This is why we actually have this floor is a little bit higher to be able to allow the vans to come into the building itself. So van parking will only be on this floor. On floors 2, 4, 5, and 6, which are typical, what you will have is actually 127,200 square feet. You'll again have 380 spaces with 6 ADA spaces, which will not be van, they'll just be ADA spaces themselves. Each floor will actually have 2 elevators on the northern side and 2 elevators on the southern side. It has 3 fire stairs, one by this elevator lobby here. Hopefully you can see. One here and then one over here. This is all based on the code and the configuration of the building itself. This will be a non-sprinklered building, but it will have 6 standpipes, which will actually be located in strategic locations for the building and its configuration. The 7th tier, which is as we're calling the 7th floor, is an open roof. And as you can see here, you'll come up and then they actually be configured in same footprint, 127,200. Again, 340 spaces and 6 ADA. So that gives you a combined total of 263 spaces there. Now, the total for the building, we have 2,548 spaces, of which there's also 42 handicap for a total of 2,590. Any questions on this so far? Yes, sir.
With regard to the impact of public safety regarding those parking lots. A couple of years ago, Short Hills Mall, their parking garage that looked similar to this. There was a shooting in that mall. Ambulance and fire personnel, rescue personnel were unable to get to the victims because of the height from the floor of the parking facility to the ceiling. Is there enough space? Do we know if there's enough space to make sure emergency personnel could get into that lot in the event of emergency?
Each of the elevators are actually gurney size, so you're able to bring in.
I'm not talking about elevators.
I understand. I'm addressing your question. So the elevators are set up for a gurney, but for a truck to get in or van height to go to those floors, no, you're not able to bring that to.
So an ambulance could never get to a victim of a sickness or a crime on the 6th deck. They'd have to take an elevator.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Logan, is there any other access to the buildings or just on the ground floor to the lobby? So is there any bridged way to the 3rd floor of any of the buildings?
Not at this time, no. There's not is only pedestrian access from grade as well as vehicular access from grade.
And are they going to be gated?
Yes.
So
And it will be some sort of
passkey or
a fob
GPS or something?
Exactly.
Right.
And then on the way out, there will actually be an automatic gate goes up, and that you'll be able to drive out. So you don't have to pass on the way out, or some sort of fob. The lighting in the building, we have, on every floor, we have a 30 by 30 bay lighting, and that actually has a 10-foot candle ratio across each floor. On the roof, we actually have a light pole that is actually 16 feet, and it's actually, again, on a 30-foot, and it's set back in the building. The way the lighting is set up is that it filters towards the perimeter of the building down to 3 to 4 foot candles. Just a point of reference, in an office space, typically it ranges from 50 to 100. We're talking about 10 is the lighting, which is suggested by the IES, and at the perimeter it's down to 2 to 3. So you don't have any light spillover. From the light fixture itself, this is a fairly recent light fixture that the lights actually will come down. It's a LED light fixture. The spillage outside of the building is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 foot candle. That's the amount of light spillage outside the building itself.
Just a question. When you look at the entrances to the building, there's one on the west side by Road D.
Yes.
Right, and then there's another on the east side by Road H.
Correct.
When you look at the fact that this is almost 2,600 parking spots,
Yes.
how do you expect the flow of traffic?
Well, that will actually be addressed by our traffic consultant and our civil. So they are prepared to review that and let you know how that queuing is going to work and how the movement on the site. All right, we just need to transition. This is just an example of the lighting on a typical floor. So we had the roof to begin with. This is the lighting on the typical floor. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a roof cam, so I apologize. So it actually spreads out, and as you can see that you can go from a 10 or a 8 down to a 3 at the perimeter, and then the spillage outside of it is about 1. Now what I'd like to do is address the exterior facade. There was, as I said, I'm sorry.
On the lighting plan, given the lighting on the roof, and it's an open roof, at night, do you anticipate the level of light contamination is going to be in that neighborhood?
We actually have a rendering with the building 100% lit, which will not ever happen unless there's some sort of event that it would cause every floor level to be occupied and people moving through the space. But the spillage outside is, as I said, is 1 foot candle from the building itself. The rest of it will be street lighting. And we have some accent lighting to actually dress the building. So I'll show you that in one of the renderings. But I appreciate the question. As you can see here, what I was talking about on the south elevation, you have undulation that's occurring, which is the sawtooth. You have a horizontal ribbon that is occurring because it's an open garage, and then you have the precast spandrels. On the precast spandrels themselves, they actually have a further undulation that's occurring. It's varying about 2 inches over a distance of 8 to 15 feet. So again, the light that is on it will actually create interest as the sun moves through the sky. The angle of the sun, as you can see, is shown here. Further to that, in the elevator lobbies and stair towers, what the client has decided is to actually address that in a curtain wall glass to make this look like an office building, a Class A office building. So this will be the nicest looking parking garage in the state of New Jersey. There's no building that will compare to this. Because of the precast panels themselves, the glass curtain wall at the 3 stairs, and the undulation that's occurring in the panel themselves as well as with the sawtooth that's occurring across. What we've done is in the plans that you have there, we actually dotted in the existing cooling tower on the east elevation and on the north elevation. So you could actually see the scale of the cooling tower is actually tending to be woven into the building itself and somewhat disappearing, the existing one that's there. Cross-section of the building we have here is in two locations. One is just cutting through the whole building itself, and the other is cutting at the ramps. So as you can see, it's a fairly clean design from just the organization of the space. What we also wanted to show you is the line of sight from the Windsor Place. We actually drove around all the neighborhoods and looked at different locations towards the building. So Windsor Place is actually 618 feet to the face of this building, which is more than 2 football fields across. So that's on your plan SC10 for those you gentlemen who have the book. And then at another distance of 128 feet, it would actually be that far away before the garage would then cut off the office building, building 200. From the Kingsland Street, we also wanted to do that at Kingsland and Bloomfield, and that distance is actually 482 feet before you would actually be to the building itself. And the line of sight, you would still see the tower that's existing, so it's really fairly low profile. And then another shot that we had there of 150 feet. Yes, sir.
How tall is building 100 Metro?
I don't have that stat right now. Do we know? I'm sorry? 110? 110 feet.
And the maximum you're proposing for the parking garage is 70 feet?
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, the next photo, or next board is actually rendering 11. We gave you a...
120?
So the next board is actually a rendering perspective view from the southwest corner looking towards the campus, being the parking garage, the building 200 and building 100, as well as a night view. And this night view, instead of giving you a partial lights, we gave you a max of 100% lights on. So as you can see, there's no spillage from the light poles on the roof itself. And these are all the lights within the parking deck itself on. There is some accent lighting on the lower part, which actually dresses it up. And then there's the street lighting. The building is designed so that it actually is motion sensors. So as you walk through the space or drive through the space, the lights go on. The client has discussed that they're going to drop these lights down to a 10% light instead of the black building, because that's going to your comment about security and people feeling comfortable walking into the building. Even though you can walk in, the light will go on. The ownership has looked at this as potentially as a 10% light value. So this is max. So 10% of this is what the light would be in the building itself. So once you move in, then the lights will still go on as you move through the space. Just to give a point of reference.
I know this is not a question for you, but Mr. Diaz, will somebody address the security within the parking garage during the day and night? Not now, later on.
The one thing I also want to point out is that during the day, this is also on daylighting. So there's sensors around the perimeter so that when the daytime light is at a certain level, the lights will go off and not be on until they're needed based on the lighting on the outside. So it'll be sensing what's going on and the lights will go on. So they'll not be on during the day except for on demand. The next rendering is actually a perspective from the southeast. This is facing up, Avenue D and along the Avenue H, I believe it is. This is the stair tower and elevator tower curtain wall. As you can see here, what we made this look like is an office building with a horizontal band, but introducing the glass that has some sort of symmetry and complement to the existing 200 building and 100 building. So what we've tried to do is tie the two together and make it look like, again, an office building, but it's actually a parking structure. This perspective, if you're looking view from the northeast, this is a representation of the cooling tower. As you can see, we've tucked it into the corner. We have it with screened, and it actually is tucked in so that you really don't see it.
That side of the building, so you're where it crosses the town line between Nutley and Clifton. So that side of the building where the cooling towers are located, that portion of the garage actually will reside in Clifton.
Thank you, Gene, for reminding me. This is a view from the northwest corner. Again, looking at the building where there's parking in the a grade outside of the building itself. Again, similar curtain wall system tied into the precast. Again, you have this undulation that's going on within the precast panels themselves and creating that light and dark and shadowing. This would be a view from roughly the 4th floor, building 100, looking at the parking garage with the plaza area between 100 and 200. I believe I can say that we pretty much have covered the building. The curtain wall is a tinted glass to complement building 200, and it's a double T precast system. So any questions do you gentlemen may have?
Mr. Logan, one more. People coming out of the garage are going to have to cross a roadway, so there's no plaza or anything connecting the parking garage to the buildings. They have to cross a roadway first before they get to the plaza? Am I right?
You're referring to right here. This is a sidewalk here. You'll cross this road to the plaza. There's a sidewalk here, and that will be addressed in what's going on in the plaza. But there's, as I said, there's 4 points of access into the building along this line. So this will be one here. There's one on this side, the other side of this, and at this stair tower.
And you're sure it's going to be the most beautiful parking garage in the state?
I will guarantee you that.
Guaranteed. Do you hear that? You hear that, commissioners?
Yeah, I heard it.
Charles, I have a question here.
Sure.
Gina, can you get on the mic?
So, Charles, two points I'd like you to speak to from an architectural perspective. The first, the design of this garage has a scissor ramp system inside, which is internal to the garage. Correct. Does not occupy any of the external walls. Correct. And that, to be clear, it is a double ramp system. So up and down on either side in terms of moving cars efficiently. But because we chose to do a slightly more expensive construction and put those ramps internal to the garage, the exterior facade is always straight as opposed to having any visible ramping to it.
Correct. The entire facade, so all the way around, is the same height all the way around. The variation in the floor of both the ramping and the drainage within the slabs themselves will be varied within the horizontal band of the building. So these bands will actually, you will not see any differential in what's going on inside the building, but it's actually hidden within that horizontal band.
Mr. Diaz, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Approximately 2,600 spaces within that garage?
2,590 at its
That's
6, 7 levels.
And,
That includes the Clifton side.
correct. And that kind of spacing, is that all for those two buildings?
Yeah, it is, the garage has been designed and is being secured from a security standpoint as well to be utilized only for the tenants occupying the 100 Metro and the 200 Metro building and their guests and invitees. Now, so I don't go on the record and someone tells me 9 months from now that I lied, let me
That can never
caveat
happen.
this. Let me caveat this since the press is here. We are working on a plan for the 200 Metro building to convert the auditorium into more of a public presentation auditorium available to not only people of the public who wish to present or rent for an event or something of that nature, but also for tenants of the campus. Ralph Lauren, as example, has already asked, even before their lease officially starts, if they could use it 3 times in the next several months. We have, on the 10th, I believe, the Hackensack Seton Hall Medical School White Coat event will be hosted in that auditorium. That auditorium is accessible from that courtyard, and it is likely if there's an outside event hosted there, that yes, there would be permitted parking in the garage for that outside event, of which is 425 maximum seats in that auditorium. We have not finalized those plans. It's possible that one of the tenants interested in the building decides they want 100% use of that. It doesn't look like that's the case, but one of the things we are planning is it's the possibility that the only other people using that garage would be potentially visitors attending a presentation or an event in that auditorium, should that auditorium become more of a public theater arts or presentation auditorium.
So most of this parking would be morning to evening, and then during the evening, would you anticipate any shared parking with anything?
No, we don't anticipate any shared parking with the garage. The tenants have the right to use those spaces in their leases 24/7, subject to municipal zoning laws in terms of access and time periods, if were there any imposed. But there are no other ideas for shared parking for that garage at this point in time, certainly not with any of the other intended uses at the campus at this point in time.
Now, I know there's been discussions about the number of spots per 1,000 square foot. It just seems like a lot of spaces for the square footage that's there. And I know somebody said 1,000, maybe you, 1,000 people in 100 and 1,100 to 1,500 people in, which gets you to the 2,500, I would assume. Just seems like a lot of spaces, a lot of people inside those buildings.
So Roche, I will tell you, Roche had a slightly different occupancy density than the tenants today, and I think that occupancy density is a point of changing attitudes among corporate America, right? I think there is a additional densification occurring these corporations in terms of the utilization of their real estate. Part of the issue is computers are getting smaller and thinner, right? Files are not as needed, so they're able to put more people in per square foot. They're counteracting that a little bit by providing additional collaborative areas and things like that, and amenitized areas for the younger workforce.
Which you see in 102.
Which you're seeing happening in 102 right now. So there's a balance of that. But all in all, we're talking about a garage that if the full 7 stories, the 7 levels are constructed because of the one particular tenant in building 200, that's about 4.6 per 1,000. Without it, it'll be just about 4. Now, Ralph Lauren has asked and negotiated for 4 per 1,000 in its lease. That's today and has been for the last 25 odd years or more, and I'm not as old as my partner, but I'm not going to make fun of him. For more than 25 years, 4 per 1,000 has been a waning standard in the suburbs. We see less in more urban areas and where there's perhaps train transportation. And I do know we are doing a lot with New Jersey Transit and looking at the bus lines here. And, you know, believe you me, if we could build fewer spaces and satisfy the requirements of corporate America today, we'd love to spend less money building parking. No one's paying us for those spaces when we build them, right? They don't pay for parking. That's not a suburban context. It's not a suburban issue. That comes along with their rent. So if we could build fewer, we'd love to build fewer, but we're driving the design based upon the demands of the tenants, the companies that are looking to be here.
And Lyft and Uber and all those other things, is that taken into consideration?
Yeah, it has, and we give, you know, as a developer, right, which is our primary responsibility and our job. We spend a lot of time theorizing about the changing environment, right? How things are changing, what the world is doing differently, how people are living, how people are working, and ride sharing, driverless cars, autonomous vehicles, all of that like seems to be you know, at the forefront of lots of discussions. It's not happening tomorrow. Is it likely to happen in 20 years? It's been estimated that to put autonomous cars at a level of 5% of the vehicles on the road will take more than 20 years. That's just 5%. So when we look at garages and consider the idea that some people have the ideas, oh, make it adaptable for something else in the future. Well, it's a good thought, but there's a couple complicating issues with that. One, to have a blanket idea that let's make every garage adaptable misses the point that you have to evaluate a garage and its surroundings or its location in terms of, does it front on a street? Can it be used for something else? Is there zoning that a municipality is willing to grant from a density standpoint to use for something else? Garages that you enter on grade, because we haven't gone to flying cars yet, so we know we have to enter the garage from the bottom up, require ramps at their core. Those ramps, if you can't get rid of them, so if you try to adapt the ground floor of a garage with ramps, your cars can't go up. So where we see adaptability happening more often is where you're building a building and a garage inside the structure, and then you build those decks so the elevator cores can continue to go down, so you can convert those floors as you go down. If, for instance, let's assume for the moment that we could cut the parking ratios by a third. We still need 1,800 parking spaces. So you're not going to get rid of the garage. We are still an automotive-driven society, whether it's ride sharing, which supplants some of those so people have fewer cars, or not. If you could get rid of a third, we'd still need 5 levels of that garage. So I don't see a situation in the future where we could make substantive changes to that garage, which has physical constraints, bounded on one side by Norfolk Southern Rail. You all have had experience. We know they're very difficult to deal with. That rail is not going away anytime soon. Bounded on the other side by 2 office buildings and a courtyard. The north side of the building is bounded by the cooling tower and mechanical equipment, which is partly responsible for attracting the quality of the companies we're getting here because of the inherent redundancy and the robust nature of the infrastructure that's here on site. We can't enter from that side, we can't convert that side, and you don't care about that side, that's in Clifton.
Not true.
I'm the other half of Prism, Gene's partner, Ed Cohen. And I'm the, let's call it the marketing specialist, having been a broker in the state of New Jersey for over 50 years. The fact of life is, for the one deal, the Ralph Lauren deal, the deal would not have been made were we not to guarantee 4 cars per thousand. With the other transaction, 2 transactions that are where we have full building users looking at the site. One of them is, as Gene said, trying to densify their space substantially, and everybody drives. They would not be considering this campus were we not to provide the level of parking for them. The second full building tenant is a less dense user, more along the lines of Ralph Lauren at the 4 per thousand. That's why that flexibility of the 7 level versus 6 level. But let us not forget, none of those 3 transactions, one of which is closed and the other 2 are pending, would not come to this site or these buildings without the level of parking that we're proposing. As Gene said, that's the last thing we want to do, is spend money on needless parking. It's not revenue producing. The only way it produces revenue is by attracting the tenants to pay rent for the buildings. So we're not just looking to create a parking city here. We're looking to accommodate the needs of the people who will populate the campus. That's the only comment I'm not making.
Commissioners, any questions?
Yes, Ed, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Is it your expectation and/or the expectation of your potential tenants, all right, that 100% of the people that are going to occupy this building are going to be driving to work? And what percentage, if any, has been discounted in this plan for people using Uber and Lyft and public transportation? Because I'm not hearing anything about that. Will this accommodate 80% of the folks who are coming to work at these sites potentially? Or is it 100%?
Both tenants have estimated that they use a 10% average, swing in people coming. Whether that's someone who's out at a meeting for the day, or someone who's taking ride sharing, somebody who's decided to take public transportation, they've all assumed about a 10% deduct in terms of their total parking need, total employee count to parking need.
Right. Don't you think that 10% is a bit low? Especially in light of how our younger people, our millennials, and those coming up behind them are transporting themselves from one place to another, and I just see it firsthand with my own children. I mean, I'm a driver, so I would need a parking spot, but they don't drive. They will call an Uber, they will take public transportation, they'll call Lyft, so there are alternate ways of them getting around. I mean, 10% seems a little light to me.
I think we're at a seismic shift in thinking here, right? We're passing the baton from the baby boomer generation to the millennial generation, right? And we know that their attitudes, their sensibilities are very, very different than yours or mine and Ed's and the other generations. Their sensibilities are a little bit different also because they are also at a very different stage in their life cycle as well, being primarily single, right? Mm-hmm. And living primarily in urban areas today. But it is fully anticipated, actually, that over the course of the next 15 years, as these millennials mature, that they will be leaving those urban areas and finding more active homes in the suburbs, which will likely increase the amount of driving that they do. Now, I agree, Commissioner Tucci, that I take Uber on occasion too. Some days I don't feel like driving to work. I'm going to be busy. I'll call an Uber and I'll take an Uber to work. We are encouraging these companies that we're talking to look at mass transit, to look at ride sharing. We've encouraged the tenant that wants that extra level on the garage. We've encouraged them and have brought up to their attention that we think we could provide what they need in coordinated bus, private bus service from certain of their higher density areas. So we're not just, skipping out on the idea that we should try and manage this process. We think, obviously, though, the decision is being driven by human resources, their CEO, their C-suite, determining here are our employees, here's what we need to provide, and we're not coming unless we're getting what we feel we need to effectively operate our business, attract the employees that we want. I'd like to see it also. I'd like to see it cut in half, but the reality is we're not there yet in this economy and in this day and age. We may someday get there, but we're never getting rid of it completely.
Right. And as far as adaptability of this structure, and this is a massive structure. It's a beautiful looking structure, but it is nonetheless a massive. So he says. Yes, you're right. So he says.
No, so he guarantees.
But at some point, and I know there are costs and other implications that you need to take into account, but the adaptability of this at some point morphing into something else, all right? In the event that we have this sea change and the movement, you know, is away from, we've already moved away from Cadillacs and Lincolns, you know, to small Toyotas and Hyundais and things of that nature. So, like, what do we do with this, you know, 15, 20 years down the road? Because we expect you to be here at least as long as Roche was here.
I tell you what we do with it 15 or 20 years from now, which it won't be 15 or 20 years. We'll be talking 30 or 40 years. All right? But know one thing, that adaptability to other uses creates additional parking load to begin with, right? Which creates more demand. So it's not a, hey, I'm going to take a floor.
Not if the culture changes. I mean, I'll agree with you to a degree, but if there's a sea change in culture.
At any percentage, whether it's a retail store or whether it's a restaurant or whether it's an urban farm that goes on the roof, portion of their employees will drive and will want to park. So there will be additional parking created by that. But more importantly, what we do in 20 and 30 and 40 years from now is, if there's been that sea change, is we take it down and we come back to you and we say, you know what, now we don't need it. Now let's see what do we want to have here next. And in 20 or 30 years, and we've paid for that garage and we've gotten our return out of it, and at that point in time, we look at land and we say, if it's become so valuable, then you'll take it down and you'll build something that is revenue generating. And that'll be the calculus that you'll make. That now I can put something in that plot, if you're willing to do it 30 years from now or 25 years from now or 40 years from now, that's revenue generating. We would much rather, as developers and as real estate entrepreneurs, put something there instead that generates revenue. So that's what will happen ultimately. It's not what do you do with it. It won't stand there and get cobwebs. It'll be taken down and you'll develop that site, because buildings are changing. And you don't know what uses you're going to need there in the future. So the idea to try and impose an adaptability on something where you have an uncertain future, you don't know what use it could be in the future, you don't know what geometry and what requirements those future uses will have in the future, it's rather myopic to think that you could solve that and create that solution today, because you don't have the answers and the questions tomorrow yet.
Right. And as part of that, I mean, a lot of this information, as good as it is, I mean, we are getting it a bit late for us to entertain and to digest and to make decisions on, all right, that are going to affect this township for many years to come, you know. And I know we all have timelines and we all have constraints and we have things that we're looking to accomplish, but you know, as a governing body, we obviously want to be cooperative, all right, with you folks as developers. We want to create the jobs. We want the tax revenue. We want the innovation. We want everything that you want to bring, while at the same time protecting our neighborhoods and worrying about what the traffic impacts will be. All right, and what the impact will be on the quality of life, because I realize folks, eventually our younger folks will be moving from the urban areas, but we are, as much as we'd like to think we are a typical suburban town, we are more urban suburban than we are suburban. So we are a very desirable place for people to stay in, all right, and to move into our neighborhoods. All right, but we need to make sure that we maintain the correct environment and the right character for us to remain as appealing as we are today.
Commissioner, I appreciate that sentiment, and you're onto the idea that you're suburban, right? You are a metroburb, right? It's a changing classification of municipalities, right? And I'm glad that you've recognized what you are, but that's why you're so attractive to people like Ralph Lauren and the other people in the medical school. But I want to point out something very important in your consideration in terms of the site. The counterfactual to the garage is no garage, which means, okay, where will the people park? We'll have to take up surface parking, which means what we're doing by spending the $38 million or so this garage is going to cost, we are providing additional land in Nutley for development, for additional ratables, so you can get more jobs and more businesses.
I realize that.
I want to be very clear that
that's something that we obviously would welcome.
And I think that's one of the things. What we're doing with this site is following exactly what you said. Make it more suburban. We're mixing parts of urbanism in this site with the suburbs. It's a very, tight walking, it's a very fine line in how you do it. I think ultimately when the full master plan comes before you and you see everything we're trying to do for the entirety of the campus, I think you'll like it all, and I think you'll understand the benefit that providing structured parking is providing from a development and value creation standpoint for the land inside Nutley and inside Clifton. So, and if you didn't have the parking and you did it all surface, well, all right, could we rent it? We'd get less money for the building. The building would therefore throw out less taxes, right? Because somebody willing to be in the building will say, I'm going to pay less because I don't get all the thing I need. I have to park very far away. So I want you to understand the calculus that we've done here relative to the site and these buildings. And to remind you again, and the public, we're not building anything new yet in terms of occupied structures. These buildings have all been occupied in the past, and Roche had over 10,000 people driving in and out of here during one point in time. We're not getting anywhere near that yet. And I do know that there will be, with the final redevelopment plan for everything, traffic studies that will need to have happened, roadway improvements that will need to be contemplated, signalization issues that will need to be thought through, and landscaping and other issues of these roadways. And we look forward to when we can come to you with those plans. But right now, the action that we're doing is ensuring that we can reoccupy the campus to get the financial stability back to those 116 acres and these townships so that we can begin the next stage of value creation on the additional land.
And Gene, I can appreciate that, but I hope you can also appreciate our perspective that without those traffic studies, without knowing what that impact will be, it makes this decision that much more difficult for us.
Mr. Mayor?
That's all I have, Mayor.
Commissioner?
I want to follow up on what I said earlier about the safety factor regarding that parking lot. Unfortunately, the Public Safety Commissioner isn't here, and this is something we should really consult him about, because without getting the right proper emergency personnel and equipment on those upper levels in the event of a medical emergency or crime, he's going to have to change some of his operations within the fire department and the police department. Because not we, but the state lived through this tragedy and a few others over the years, that an elevator going up to the 6th floor where a person is victimized by a crime or a medical emergency is tough to swallow. What if the elevator's out? What if there's an electrical failure? So there is a need to get emergency personnel into the parking lot. It's beautiful, it's a nice building and all that, but that doesn't suffice for the safety of people who are going in there. So I have an idea going through my mind that I'm going to speak to the Public Safety Commissioner about, but I couldn't make any decision in good conscience until I'm satisfied that if my kid was on the 6th floor of that parking lot and became the victim of a crime or a medical emergency, that the police could get there in 2 minutes or less.
Commissioner, I'll address a little bit of the safety and security aspects. And one thing I will point out, 10 feet, 8 inches. That's actually at the upper end of what's considered the standard for parking garages. The Short Hills garage, I've parked there, I know it well, has about 6.5 feet of clearance in it. At 10 foot 8, we're getting nearly 8 feet, 8 foot 7, 710, almost 8 feet of nominal clearance in the garage. So the Short Hills, very different garage, built under very different circumstances. 2, that was a garage open to the public, right, with heavy retail use and a lot of transient uses in there. This is a garage where you're likely to know everybody who's going in and out of it. Now, that doesn't affect the medical emergency issue, and considering that we are a campus that is seated by a hospital and its medical school, right, and is at the forefront of medicine, it's an important thing for us to consider. And you have our commitment to work with, and we've had this discussion with Clifton concerning the overall campus. We still have a command center and a security command center on campus with over 137 cameras that are active. We intend to look and to work with the police department in both townships on force mobilization, right, and force enhancement with these aspects. It can be things as well as we've talked about photographic license plate tracking and things of that nature. So we will have for this campus, as part of our overall campus operations, an extremely robust safety and security operation that is ongoing. And the commitment that we have will be to work with the emergency responders and the first responders to ensure that when there is, if there is an issue, that we've made whatever adjustments within the limits that we have here to allow the rapid access and service to somebody in need.
All right, Gene, that's what I was looking for. If there's a commitment from you that you'll work with the Public Safety Commissioner to ensure that these issues that need to be discussed, I'm satisfied with that. So.
And we will, when we appear before the planning board with a site plan application. I believe one of the checklists is to look at safety, security, and access with the fire department and the police. And we will, and you have our commitment to continue to work through that.
You understand the concern, right?
We intend to run an extremely safe campus.
Okay.
We would never want an incident to happen that would cause someone to rethink wanting to be here. So it is at our forefront. There will be 10,000 people here, 9,000 people here in the future once again, and crowds, have their own way of attracting sometimes some undesirables. So we get it, and we'll deal with it.
You satisfied me. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Diaz, anybody else going to be presenting?
I think there was a question on by Commissioner Evans on the ability to access the garage from its two entrances and the stacking and queuing relative to the number of vehicles coming in and out.
And Gene, I had one other question before that, before you go to that. Can you give an update? This particular spot on the campus had environmental challenges associated with it. And can you give us an update as to what's the condition of that site right now?
Yes, Commissioner. So let me just say this. We've continued to work with Roche and the remediation efforts on campus, which again, go beyond the normalcy of what a corporation generally would do. They've been extremely responsive to us in helping us in our redevelopment efforts of the campus in terms of relocating wells and moving through more expeditious and more costly types of remediation. So again, we're never happy that they left, of course, but the things that they are doing to help transition and to work through this should be commended, and I'll call that out here as well. That particular site, Commissioners, has some more deep aquifer groundwater contamination of some PCE, TCE primarily as the product. We've worked with Roche in this regard for that to remove their interim measures that they had put there and to actually do a very expensive deep well re-injection of that site with a material that will help degrade rapidly any remaining contaminants that remain below the ground. In the interim, we will have wells and things that have to be reset, cut off, and capped. We're working with Roche on that now. So this particular site, to put a occupiable building on it as well, might raise some issues for some people, given what was historically underneath. An open garage, you don't have those issues, all right, of vapors. We will put a vapor mat in the occupiable areas of the garage, such as the storage area and the elevator lobbies, so that will exist. But I will say that it's the overall health of the campus from an environmental standpoint is looking very, very good at this point in time. And Roche is beginning to get clean bills of health from the DEP for some of these areas. This is one of those areas that is transitioning next to allow us to do this, and Roche is doing their best job to help expedite that by spending additional dollars in a pool of money that we had set aside with them at closing for just this purpose.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, Gene, any area that is occupiable, so where people will be congregating, storage areas as well as the elevators, you're going to make sure that whatever is necessary to mitigate any environmental risk is going to be in place? Is that?
Yes, we actually have a covenant in our deed and transfer declaration with Roche to do that.
The second is that Is there anything that would prevent you from actually building the garage, given the environmental state of that site?
No, there's nothing that would prevent us from building it. We would potentially, if there were, in the future, if for some reason levels were to rebound or something, if this wouldn't work, then there would be additional wells that would occur inside the garage itself, and they would be used in the future. So there will be some wells that will continue to be active and monitored in the ground floor of the garage, and we'll have to set those in the garage itself. Those will be available for future purposes and monitoring.
And the nature was obviously safety, obviously, but also we've talked about adaptability, right, and thinking about how things are going to change. And so I was just at a root saying, is there a constraint that is associated with the environmental state of the property that would prevent a reuse of the property, as you suggested, for something that's more enclosed, occupied space?
It would present more of a challenge, but technology is getting every day, and it's a question of dollars to make it happen.
Fair enough.
Matt, your question on ingress, queuing, stacking.
Good evening. I'm Matt Seckler with Stonefield Engineering. We were the traffic engineers for this project. I think there was a couple of questions regarding the way the ingress and egress of the driveways will work out. As was previously mentioned, there will be 2 access points to the garage, allowing for ingress and egress traffic. This garage is actually pretty unique in the design, the fact that it's really for only a single use, office use, which means you have a pretty heavy directional flow of traffic. So unlike the parking garages in Morristown or Hoboken, where they're constantly turning over cars, there's people leaving and coming in all throughout the day, this sees basically everyone enter in the morning and leave in the evening. The typical key fob, easy pass kind of style gate system for a garage could process about 800 cars an hour. So this garage, having 2 entrance points, could process about 1,600 cars an hour. Typically, we see office buildings fill up at about the highest hour. About 45% of the occupants would arrive in a single hour. You know, you kind of have a bell curve. Some people like to arrive early. Some people kind of arrive, most people arrive in the 7 to 9 o'clock hour, but you never see more than about 45% of the people all arriving at once. So we believe that we have sufficient adequacy to process all those cars coming in. And additionally, when you enter the garage, you have a clear space to enter, and you get to those ramps. You're not like when you're maybe backed up at the Garden State Plaza or some of those malls where, you know, the second you enter a garage, there's parking spaces immediately to the right and left, and people kind of stop once they get through the gate. Here, it's the same users every day. They'll tend to basically, if you know you get there at 8:30, you know you're going to have to hit the ramps, maybe get to the 2nd or 3rd floor instead of circling all the lot itself. So I think it's going to be a very efficient design. And additionally, egress, most likely the egress module will be a gate, but it'll basically detect when a car is approaching the exit gate and pop open. So you don't need to provide a separate level of security in terms of leaving the garage. So you could process, in that case, anywhere from 950 to 1,000 cars an hour, when really all you're doing is rolling over to the gate pops open and you drive out. There's no type of key access in terms of leaving the garage. So I believe that the garage design can adequately support the overall development. In terms of, I think there was discussions regarding impact to the roadway network beyond this specific garage. Again, this is just one portion of what Roche had in terms of their overall employee development. And as you can see from the site today, we've now opened the site for access from Kingsland through to Route 3. Previously, Roche didn't just let you drive through the campus. If you were parked on one side to the other, you were basically constricted either to the Route 3 access points or the Kingsland access points, or Isabella if you were on that side of the site. So what we have now is if people are looking to head east in the evening on the return trip home, instead of leaving the garage and exiting towards Kingsland like they used to in the past, they'd be able to use Route 3 and just get on Route 3 and head that direction. So I do think the way we're able to disperse traffic is actually an enhancement over what Roche had in the previous condition.
Just on that, there's almost 2,600 vehicles that are associated with this garage. There's also 500 students that are coming, plus researchers, administration people, and so on. some 1,800 spaces are approved, for the medical school piece. It is an ongoing question among the Board of Commissioners as to the flow of the traffic, right? And what's going to happen to a old roadway at Kingsland, right, which is one lane going east and west, and an exit and an entrance on Route 3 that basically allows you to enter going eastbound and exit going eastbound, which is going to create overflow on, if you got to go west. So you're either going to go out Kingsland to go west, or you're going to go to Cathedral, or go on Route 3 to make the U-turn and things like that. So those are just elements of the volume that are creating a lot of concern on the part of the board, which remain open. They're open questions, right? So when I look at the way this garage is laid out, do you have any insight as to the likelihood of, when you say 45% per hour, right? So
At the highest hour we expect is about 45% of the employees arriving.
So between 7 and 9, 2 hours, 90% of the people.
Between 7 and 9, we typically see about 75% of the people would arrive during those hours.
75, give it 75. 75% of 20 or 2,600 people, right? Where are they going to come from? Coming in from Kingsland, Route 3, right? Do you have any sense of what that flow and burden is going to be?
So we typically see is, especially where this site is located in the southern portion of the property, there'll be obviously a little bit more leaning towards Kingsland. I believe it'll probably be about 35% of the traffic using Route 3 driveways, and the remainder using Kingsland driveways is probably the way that we've looked at how this site lays out. The direction of traffic, again, people coming in the northbound direction, some people may take the Parkway and get off early and cut through to Kingsland. Some people may continue on to Route 3 and come in through the main entrance that way. Most people, honestly, these are commuters. They find their way to commute. After the first week, they'll know their path of travel. And again, when we're talking about these parking space numbers, and I think people on the board mentioned the parking rates and the parking ratios, a lot of that is driven by where people are current. These are mature businesses that are moving their employees to this location. I imagine as this location becomes their permanent place, there's more likely that people will be moving to locations closer to the site. I don't have any knowledge regarding those potential occupants of these buildings, where these people are coming from, but it's likely, again, if they end up working here, they may end up choosing to live either on the bus line so they can take the bus to work, or within the community where it's a short commute, possibly a walk or a bike as well. So I think there's opportunities as this site matures to bring some of these parking ratios down from the 4.6 to something slightly lower. But I think, again, that initial move is going to require that extra parking supply. And regarding your traffic generation or trip generation numbers, the 75% of this 2,500 number, it still pales in comparison to what Roche was. And I know that the applicant is committed as we go to the new buildings. Again, this is just reoccupying, that we'll be looking to providing that traffic study that looks at the overall roadway network and what improvements can be made to to Bloomfield Ave, to Passaic, to these other roadways that kind of feed into the site itself, as those, I'd say, new developments get put on board, not the bringing back up the existing occupied buildings.
Mr. Sackler, excuse me, Commissioner. And I've heard this in past meetings about what was previous with Roche. And we lived it, and we put up with it. And looks like we're going to have to put up with it again. But I want you to understand that it wasn't good back then. And to keep going back and saying, well, you guys dealt with this before. Yeah, we did, but it wasn't pleasant to do. All right? So I want you to be cognizant of what we feel up here because we lived it and what our residents lived it.
Again, and I understand that fact. I know when the police officer stood in Isabella to let people out of that driveway. I drove through the area, and I remember before the signal was redone at the main driveway at Kingsland, having a police officer out there. So I know the experience that you're referring to. We're not close to that level today, and again, when we start providing those new buildings on the campus, we will be improving it well beyond what that threshold was that you had to deal with the Roche project.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize, so Mayor took a little bit of my thunder on my point
Sorry,
there.
sorry,
You're the mayor, so that's okay. Just, I want to emphasize that anytime we reference what used to be on Roche, it was many, many, many years ago, and so the town itself has evolved since then too, right? So, and the dynamics around how many cars are in town, how many people on each household, how many cars they have, right? When you think about it, all of those factors, that's why it's of great concern to us. So, as you start to look at that study, it's going to be imperative that we, as a board, better understand the reality of that impact and what will need to be done in order to accommodate that impact by today's standard, not the standard that existed from Roche some 20 years ago.
Commissioner, no one's suggesting that we're going to go back to the way it was when Roche was there. Roche was a different occupant altogether than what we're seeding the campus with today. And more importantly, remember that the overall goal of our redevelopment plan and our master plan vision for the campus is to create a mixed-use, pedestrian-friendly campus. So Roche was all office, research, laboratory space, all 9 to 5. The commutation patterns of repopulating this campus will be very different. It will have very different feel to it, very different impacts to it, and we think it will actually be a much more even impact overall. And when we get to that stage and we present professional testimony with respect to traffic studies and analysis that are done for those specific uses and purposes, I think you'll have more than opportunity to see and understand and work with both the county on Kingsland Street, the state on Route 3. But understand again, as Mr. Seckler pointed out, when Roche occupied the site, you were not permitted to go north-south through the campus. So if you parked down south, you came out down south. It forced a lot of traffic in areas that were sort of not naturally, that you wouldn't naturally go in terms of a journey to work. And I think those things will all come out in the wash at the end of the day, but understand that we don't intend to repopulate this campus with 10,000 people 9 to 5. That's not the goal. Our goal is when people come to the campus, ultimately, is to have the services and amenities and other options on the campus so they don't leave right away, that they may stay in the evenings for after hours to take advantage of other options of food or beverage or things that are there on the campus as well. But also, the school is very different hours in terms of how they function than Roche. So I do think it is a complex narrative, and I think it's a complex narrative that will get more than enough attention by professional testimony, by examination of your professionals and review of that work, and by public input. So we do look forward to getting to that stage, but I do want to emphasize again that these 3 buildings we're looking to reoccupy these buildings today, and that's a fraction of what had been totally in the campus in the past. That's the only point we're making.
Gene, do you have a timeline as to when these traffic studies are going to be completed? I know we talk about, as we go along, but again, it's very difficult for us, to make intelligent, informed decisions without having any kind of timeline.
I'm aware, Commissioner, that there was a preliminary traffic study that was submitted and provided to the township's professionals, which looked at the reoccupation of these buildings and the other known activity on the campus today. And there was a study that was prepared, there were counts given, and there was a study that was provided in that regard. The time frames for everything else in terms of future development beyond these occupancies, I think our goal is, once we deal with the task at hand of these buildings, is sometime in the fall to unveil the overall master plan study for the overall campus in terms of the mix of uses, the densities of those uses, et cetera, that we would like to see occupy the 116 acres. I think that's sometime in the fall. Keep in mind that the Ralph Lauren occupancy here would be the end of 19, early 2020. So it's not happening tomorrow, right? It's a year and a half from now at this point in time. And same thing goes with the tenants we're talking to on Building 200. They seem to be in the early 2020 occupancy stage. So we have time. We're working through these issues and are going to present the factual data behind the choices that you'll have to make in the future.
Mr. Diaz, this presentation was for us to give you okay to go before the planning board, correct? So you're going to have any more information on the whole site plan itself? We've dealt with the garage. We talked a little bit about traffic.
So let me address two other items that we're going to that would be presented to the planning board.
Right. So, like maybe just show the subdivisions, so we can see that and the public can see it.
So
then any additional surface parking that you plan.
So what I'd like to do, Mayor, is we can cover the subdivisions. I'd like to show you, we have our landscape architect from the firm of Weintraub Diaz here, no relationship to this Diaz, but to show you the plans for the courtyard area between 100 and 200, which we intend to transform into more of an open public courtyard and an environment. I'd like to show you that, and we'd like to show you the improvements to be made to building 100 Metro for the lobby improvements. We'd like to show you that as well. So if you like that order, we can talk about the subdivision plans with civil engineering.
Excuse me, can we also touch upon, if you're at liberty to do so, what's going to happen on the Clifton side? Because obviously what happens there will impact us, and what happens on our side will impact them. So if we can get a flavor as to what to expect?
What I can tell you now on the Clifton side is, because what's going to happen in Clifton is going to be dependent on Clifton, and Clifton's going to preside over the similar presentations that we make over there. What I can tell you that we know today, right, is you understand that Quest Diagnostics was approved by Clifton and by the county planning board to construct a 250,000 square foot diagnostic research laboratory west of the train tracks, all right, over by Isabella.
Mr. Diaz, you have a shovel in the ground timetable?
It's looking like sometime in August. Assuming
August of 18?
August of 18 in terms of construction start, with an occupancy again by them sometime in 2020. Quest, what I can tell you about that, that I'm permitted to say, that's not covered by non-disclosures at this point in time. What I can tell you about this, we do think Quest as an occupant is an ideal occupant for this campus, because their peak hour traffic is very different than normal office research peak hour traffic. Their peak hour is much later in the evening, 7 to 10 at night, right? And not during the day, 9 to 5. Because what happens is all their people are picking up the specimens from the various doctors' offices, and they're coming in after hours. So we think they're a great complement to the campus overall from a traffic pattern standpoint, because they don't load the same way in terms of their traffic demands during the same peak hours that everybody else does. So again, this is a flattening of that demand that everybody's concerned about, and that you've historically experienced. This again is yet another user that we think we're flattening that demand curve out, so that you don't see these terrible spikes which cause all the problems and the backups and the issues. The other thing I can tell you is that we're finalizing a transaction for a hotel of approximately 255 rooms. It's a dual brand hotel with a major flag. I can't tell you who yet, but that is to appear on the Clifton side, closer to Route 3. So those are the things that are happening in Clifton today that I can tell you about. The balance is going to be presented sometime to Clifton, again, sometime around the fall, same time frames as we anticipate the balance of the Nutley portion of the campus for future development and additional value creation projects.
Thank you.
Mr. Diaz, one of our concerns in the plan was at least knowing what's going on the Clifton side. And one of the reasons, like the Quest property, for instance, their sewage is going to be going into our system. Their stormwater is going to go our way. So it's very important for us to know, and that's one of the reasons that we want to see that in the plan, so that we at least have an idea what's going on and what we can anticipate in the future.
Upon my review of the plan and negotiations with your professionals and your redevelopment subcommittee, yes, we have agreed to provide advanced copies under a timetable of whatever it is we provide to Clifton ultimately, so that you can see and have an opportunity to comment with us in the future on those plans. In terms of sewage, I'm more than happy to state that we will resolve any outstanding issues. I don't believe there will ever be an issue other than cost, which I know there's cost agreements that have been in place that we need to reenact. Right now, there's very little going through, but we need to reenact those cost agreements. We're prepared to reinstitute and enter into those agreements. But I do know that this systems that were designed for this campus are capable of carrying 16 million gallons a day, and we don't anticipate ever getting up to that. And its systems and its connector systems through you and to Passaic Valley. So I believe that the systems themselves are adequately sized and capacity, and I'll let the professionals speak to that in future testimony on those items. But yes, I do believe, Mayor, that we did cooperate with your request in terms of seeing those plans and those ideas and talking about them.
Thank you.
Subdivisions?
Yeah, I think, at least show them.
Quickly?
So, I mean, I think we've all seen them in the plan, but I think it's for the public to understand what's going on. Let's see. Mr. Diaz, for the rest of your presentation, how long do you think you need so that we can all get to 4th of July sometime, before 4th of July?
Definitely before the 4th. Yeah.
How about before 10:30?
Could we order out and bring in some beers or something? And keep everybody
we still have the rest of our meeting to do.
So I think 30 minutes or so. I think we can get you through the visuals to satisfy you and your curiosity and desire and intent. So
thank you.
Wait tomorrow. Go wait tomorrow. Tomorrow. Call. Okay. Yeah, that's 2 hours.
Mr. Powers, introduce yourself. It is what it is. Add a tape on the TV.
All set.
You all set? Commissioners, my name's Steve Powers. I'm with Greenberg Farrow. We are the civil engineer for the project. What we have here is the subdivision, the proposed subdivision plan. We have essentially, where you're looking right now, is the garage property and building 100 and 200 subdivision on this sheet of paper. We're breaking up the existing Lot 1, Block 201, into Lot V, which was the garage property through here. Lot W, which will be building 200, and Lot X, which will be building 100.
Mr. Diaz, we have anything we can put up on the screen?
It's not the subdivision. Okay. We do not have minimized sets of the subdivision plans. So to continue, Lot V is essentially what we've been talking about for the majority of the night, which is the garage lot. We do meet a lot of the bulk requirements that are proposed in the development plan. We are looking for relief. There are some aspects of setbacks, for example, specifically along the southwestern property line where there's a 20-foot setback requirement. We're proposing 5 feet in several spots. lot width, which essentially is the width of the common area, is 120 feet, which I believe is proposed as 150 feet now in the redevelopment plan. The reason for that is we are trying to meet offset requirements for the existing buildings that are in place to make sure that 20-foot setback is maintained. In addition to that, we do have impervious coverage right now, where, as you can imagine, the majority of the proposed Lot V property is covered by the garage. We do have minimal areas of landscaping, which we've proposed to landscape. We do have our landscape architect to discuss that. And the common area, which separates building 100 and 200, there is a good amount of it. We're looking at about 75%, which will meet the code. However, that carries us over the the maximum allowable impervious area for the entire Lot V. So that is something that we would like the commissioners to consider. That's all for Lot V, W, and X, unless the commissioners had any questions.
I don't want to rush you, but we have 20 minutes left on this DVD before they have to switch over. So in the interest of transparency, I know a lot of folks are listening in tonight and watching. Let's try and keep to that.
Okay, and then this is the final subdivision plans for lots Y and Z. Building 102 or Building 111, as it's been referred to, we're looking at combining Block 300, Lot 20, and Lot 1 together and subdividing it. And this would be essentially to accommodate Modern Meadow in the proposed pilot plant once it is developed. Lot Z borders Kingsland, and the use for that has not yet been determined. However, there are no, other than the proposed setback that we will eventually propose to the board for the parking that we're going to reconfigure does impact the 20-foot development setback. We're at 17.5 now, so it is a 2.5-foot relief that we would like to discuss with the commissioners. Otherwise, proposed Lot Z, there is no current use now. We would be looking to develop that in the future and present that to the commissioners as well as the board.
Any questions, commissioners?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Powers.
Thank you, Commissioners. We'd like to quickly move into the changes, adaptations, and improvements to 100 Metro Boulevard that we're proposing to complete for Ralph Lauren, make an already attractive building significantly more attractive. We've got a colleague here from Gensler who can help us walk you through this, but I'll just lay the groundwork for you very quickly so that you can see this is the courtyard out here for 100 Metro Boulevard. This out and this side would be the Metro Boulevard roadway, the main campus roadway on this side. The garage would be back over in here. And what we're planning on doing is taking out the precast, which looks like this right now on this side, removing this for 2 stories, and recladding in a 2-story floor-to-ceiling glass, removing a portion of the second floor slab to create additional height and volume in that lobby, providing a very attractive metal panel clad, we call it an eyebrow, accentuating that entrance, which extends about 8 feet from the building, 6 feet from the building, the eyebrow? About 6 feet from the building. And allowing us to really identify a primary entrance for this building, which it does not have today. Because there was an entrance for the building on Metro Boulevard, there's an entrance for the building behind it by the loading docks, and there's an entrance here, and the building needs a front door and a front address. So we think these improvements are going a long way to make those happen. I'll turn this over to Mike, and he can answer questions and give you further description.
Can you reorient us again on where this would be?
So if you are here on the roadway, looking into the courtyard between the two buildings, I would be Building 76, 200 Metro, standing right here, right now. You're standing out in the roadway. You're looking into the courtyard. You're looking at this building on the left.
Introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mike Hicks. I'm an architect. I work with Gensler. And basically everything Gene just said with what's going on here, you can see that this is the existing building. It's a precast building here, and we are removing a portion of it down the front, making a new entry off the courtyard side to the project. We do have the eyebrow that we're helping define the space around here, creating the open lobby inside. We are also doing a two-story space within the building as well. There is an exterior canopy that is out here as well, which is in some of the hardscape that comes in. So it's a little protection as you come into the building. Through here, I can show you this is the interior lobby of the space. As you come into the building, you can see that we've already incorporated Ralph Lauren in the building, and we've created a two-story space in here just to open up the building. And the idea, too, behind the facade opening up, removing some of those panels, was just to get some more light into the space to just make this a grand entry area and foyer space within the project here at the lobby space. As you continue in, we did just develop a little bit of a space towards the back. It could be a coffee bar area within the first floor of the project. These are all in your papers that were handed out. So it's a little idea of what's going on in the feel of the building inside here as well. We also created, as you continue to walk in and around the lobby, from what was like the coffee bar area, an area of refuge, an area that they can just occupy, use this floor, sit, gather in the area here as well. And there's a couple other pictures in your documentation there, too, of the elevator area as you come in, and that entry area as you come in faces a stair that we opened up in the back to get into the rest of the building.
My compliments, by the way. Looks beautiful.
Thank you.
I like it.
Landscape? Yes?
So, Gio, are you doing the, Gio's doing it? Okay. I'd like to point to this picture for a moment so that you don't get confused. So, at a point in time, we did not have a design for the courtyard when we needed to create the image and discuss this with Ralph Lauren. So we now have a design for this courtyard that's different than here, so just don't be confused about it. And I think ultimately what we're trying to create with the landscaping and the courtyard between these two buildings is a place that becomes usable for the occupants of both buildings, but inviting and open to the public, as the public now can go through the campus, right, without security and walk through and find places that may sit. It may also serve as an area of respite for those people coming in to look at, to take in something that might happen at the auditorium in the future as well. So we've created a series of areas of seating and other areas of gathering, lots of areas of planting, and a central water feature. And I'll let Gio Diaz from Weintraub Diaz walk you through all those changes in plants and species and coverages and all the technical details. Gio?
Thank you, James. In 12 minutes.
Or less.
Giovanni Diaz, landscape architect, Weintraub Diaz, landscape architecture. I will start with the landscape around the garage building The landscape has been developed to enhance the architecture of the building as well as provide partial screening. There is a landscape associated with the surface parking area. That landscape is primarily evergreen plant material and grasses. Evergreen to provide year-round screening of the vehicles in the lot, and the grasses to provide some motion and different texture to the planting. There are deciduous and evergreen trees along the what was called sawtooth facade, the west facade of the garage, and that again is to enhance and define the building envelope. Were there any questions regarding the landscape at the parking garage structure? I would now speak to the plaza open space in between the 100 and 200 Metro office buildings. As Gene indicated, it is a very diverse, rich public open space that will serve not only as amenity to the users of the office building, but to the greater community and public. It will provide an identity for the office buildings and would be the initial open space that the community could recognize and use. It is defined by circulation paths adjacent to the office buildings, and it transitions in through a variety of spaces to the central area that becomes more intimate and more programmed with raised counter areas for people to work at, more secluded areas with different types of angled seating for lounging, as well as more open spaces for event that could happen from the theater area and spill out into this open space. We're very excited about what this open space can be, not only in terms of it serving the office space, but also in terms of when the campus begins to grow and this becomes a much more desirable amenity in terms of having shade and having a relief from the typical sidewalk suburban experience. One of the additional plans we have here is just some dimension plans. I just wanted to clearly run through just to show that the openness and porosity of the space. We are looking at over about 15 feet clear on each end, which is almost the width of the sidewalk. So very much clear circulation, clear lines of sight so that there's safety from one end to the other. And as part of this space, we understand that Metro on the east side of the open space is a significant space that we expect to have more of the community traffic. And because there is this raised garage structure, we're sensitive to that pedestrian human experience, and so we're providing a taller screen element at the garage side so that at the human eye level, your focus is not necessarily on the architecture beyond, but it is on the space that you're in, and it is being enveloped primarily by the planting and the canopy.
Screening element proposed at the back end between the garage, the roadway in between that the Commissioner pointed out we will walk across, and this corridor. So we've done something we think really unique in the design element feature here at the human level, so that when you're in the corridor, you're not staring across the roadway behind you in the garage. We provide a very ornate metal screening system with planters in it and vines and other things that can grow. That when you're in the corridor, that's what you'll be seeing instead of sort of the garage at your eye level. But you need to talk about the height and size of that one more.
Absolutely. So what we have here on the board here now is an elevation of that screen adjacent to the redeveloped facade of the 100 office building. And below it is a blow-up of that plan. So when you are in this open space, you are experiencing the elevation of this screen, which conceals at the human level, the garage structure beyond. Not only are we developing the screen so that it has a height that is complementary to the architectural lines in the building adjacent, we're also proposing trees that would even grow taller than the screen and provide further screening of the garage. This screen is still the details are still being worked out, but as Gene indicated, it is a screen that is going to have a lot of texture to it in terms of the planting that we're incorporating in it and different types of materials.
It's not solid, so it has lots of holes and areas for light and shade and stuff. It's not a solid wall, but it's sort of an open lattice metal type screen.
You should have this drawing in the package provided, and we have a section at different areas of this screen so that you can see it's actually, there is some porosity to it, not completely opaque.
The only overall question I would say, or really more of a comment, as I've traveled quite a bit in my career, I was always impressed with areas where they lend themselves towards promoting creative thinking, right? The idea that you could be in a different environment and you can sort of, let and be more social about that, recognizing that we're going to have scientists on campus, medical students on campus, just the nature of what we're trying to build here. Anything you can do to sort of take that area and make it more conducive?
Here, you point out the different types of seating areas, including the ends where we have theaters around.
Yes.
For presentations and the like. So we've provided exactly what you're referring to, right? There's different opportunities for different types of social interaction and exchange of things happening, active things happening within this course.
Yeah, it's just, and I agree, Gene. I saw that. It just my reflection was that when I was at Google headquarters, visiting Google headquarters, and it's obviously it's a different climate, a different place, but they did have sort of areas where you could bring work, basically take outside and bring it in. You can go outside, you can go to work, you could do all those types of things.
And that's what we're trying to promote here in terms of the different types of seating. So even in this amphitheater-like setting here, this is meant to be more of a group working session as opposed to the central room here where these are raised counters with USB connections, so it's actually meant to be, outdoor workstations, as well as having tables where this would be more of an event or group or teaching type session. Smaller breakout groups could happen in this area over here, as well as the benches adjacent to the more intimate areas are designed so that they're seating both social and also away from each other, so that you could have that experience that you're looking for, whether you're trying to interact with someone or you're just trying to be creative and work alone.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Any other questions? Because I think we got 1 minute left on the tape.
I just have one comment, Mayor. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of beautiful buildings. I see your screening, being the park commissioner. I can appreciate a lot of what you're speaking about, but I'm a little disappointed. I'm not hearing anything about how we integrate all the wonderful things that are going to go on 3 into Nutley. All right, how we segue from what you're doing there into Nichols Park, how we get from Nichols Park to Franklin Avenue, how our existing businesses also flourish and grow and expand with a lot of the great things that you're looking to do here. I'd like you to speak to that if you could for a moment.
Commissioner, so the redevelopment plan for the moment, right, with purpose and intent, doesn't yet address those issues, right? It is noted within it that those issues are going to be addressed in the next phase of the master plan in terms of how we create the positive connection and linkage through both landscaping, streetscaping, wayfinding, right? And we're already developing some of those things right now to discuss with your professionals, right? So I know this is happening, but we are keenly intent on borrowing downtown Nutley for this campus, right? So we think that reinforcing the connection between your downtown and this campus, tying them in through Nichols Park, right? That there's a great opportunity to do that, and I think these are further discussions that need more input from your professionals, more design work, and again, would be part of a streetscape plan, and I think the streetscape